Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock that I recommend to all of you. And today I've got a really great one. This is Neal Morse's new album, The Dreamer, Joseph Part 1. I'm a huge Neal Morse fanatic. If you watch any of my channel, you should know that by now. He's my favorite musician, musical artist. He's really what revolutionized my love for music and brought me into the prog world at the fanatical pace that I'm at now. I just really love everything that he's about and the music that he puts out there. I know he's not for everybody, and especially in recent times, I know there's been some criticism of him following a formula and delving too deep into these more spiritual lyrics, which not everyone's a fan of. But I just really appreciate his output, the strength of his compositions, how he's able to blend these cool proggy instrumental fireworks with these really catchy melodic choruses that really stick in your head and create these earworms. And it's just the perfect blend for a person like me who loves this style of progressive rock. And so this album in particular, I was a little bit nervous about coming in, thinking that it might not be up my lane exactly, because I wasn't the biggest fan of Jesus Christ the Exorcist, which came out several years back. I'm not a big musical guy or musical theater or anything of that ilk. I much more appreciate just prog rock albums, and so it was hard for me to really get into because there's so much going on with this storytelling device and having all these different vocalists portray these different characters, and it just felt more cheesy to me, like what I think about when I think of like a stage musical that just it's good for what it is, but it's just not my style. It's not something I prefer, and I thought this album would be similar to that because it's being released on Frontiers, which is the same label that released Jesus Christ the Exorcist, and it's once again following a biblical story and was somewhat billed as a bit of a rock opera in a similar style to Jesus Christ the Exorcist. But to my delight, this album is not really that at all. It's much more prog-centric. It feels a bit like Sola Gratia that came out not too long ago, with a little bit of those musical touchstones like Jesus Christ the Exorcist. It's definitely there in drips and drabs and is something that you'll definitely hear in the makes. There's different vocalists, there's sections where they're really just telling the story as it happens in a bit more of a straightforward manner like you'd expect in a musical, some more campy elements and things like that. But to me, it's utilized more as a flavor of the music as a whole and not just what the whole piece is about, if that makes sense. You know, this is more of a rock album at its core, but they utilize some of these musical theater tricks to give it a different feel in certain sections. So to me, that's a bit more palatable to my taste and has made me just really fall in love and enjoy this record. And so it comes as a strong recommendation. I hope you guys will check it out. For my money, it's not as proggy as some of his other projects, especially stuff he's been doing lately with the Neal Morse Band. There's a lot more of like this more bluesy rock vibe to it. Some of these tracks feel like maybe more straightforward rock songs, but there's enough interesting flourishes throughout that keep it grounded in his typical prog rock style. So I think it works as a whole and just makes for a fun, captivating listen. And really that's what he's known for, and what I've liked about him all through his career is that he's able to write good songs at their core and adds a layer of progressive rock on top of what is already just really great, well-written, well-crafted songs that you could pull out of this prog rock piece and almost just create just a good little rock song out of that just has good melodies and catchy choruses and really strikes your ear. But the fact that he infuses that with all of this progressive rock over the top just really adds that secret sauce to me to make it that much more interesting and captivating. So we start with the Dreamer Overture. What's a Neal Morse album without an overture, right? So we got to start with that. It really starts in an interesting way with the sound of a fly buzzing around your head before it morphs into this more strings-based kind of droning sound. We get some quirky Morsean prog instrumental craziness, as you'd expect. Great proggy keys. There's a gong in the back. Morphs through all these big themes from the record in an epic fashion. I love how there's some added orchestration with strings and horns halfway through, giving it this big epic quality. Great sweeping, beautiful strings toward the end that add a pretty atmosphere. Just a really great opening, especially for the prog fanatics out there to be excited about that. Yes, this is a prog album. We've got some prog elements here to really carry the day. And this leads into a really beautiful track called Prologue Before the World Was. Very much a ballad, a serene, beautiful song that Neal's known for, with some light drumming, beautiful keys. Gets more passion behind it as the track proceeds, but it just remains as this really beautiful, pretty song that adds some choir elements and a great guitar solo at the end from Steve Morse. And then we get more into the more rockier sections here with A Million Miles Away, a bluesy acoustic guitar riff with some congas in the back, gives it a bit of a groovy feel. Great rock song with a super catchy melody, just like Neal is prone to write. Infectious melodies and grooves, picking acoustic guitars at the end that leads into Burns Like a Wheel, which has a cool proggy acoustic groove and introduces some other singers to the mix. The cool thing about this that I think also sets it apart from Jesus Christ the Exorcist is that Neal Morse sings a lot of the lead on here, so it feels more like a pure Neal Morse solo album rather than an ensemble piece that he wrote for other singers. But there are other singers that come into the story, and this is where you get a bit of the introduction of that, with Ted Leonard giving some great piercing vocals, and Matt Smith as well in the second half. Great introduction to these singers, some bluesy funk in the mix here with a bit of a straightforward rock chorus. This leads into Liar Liar with a bit of a harder classic rock opening, some prog flavor and wah-wah guitars. Some more guest vocalists taking the forefront on this. A cool song with great rock groove and big expansive melodies with just a hint of prog flavoring over the top. Great wicked organ solo at the end of the track as well, just really adding to this cool bedrock of prog sound, but more of a straightforward rock bass line. So a really cool track there. The Pit is where we get a little bit into that more musical theater type feel with some keyboard and impassioned vocals from the guest vocalist. A little bit campy, some bouncy keyboards, almost a power pop type vibe to this, but it still keeps grounded in this little bit of prog backbone, keeping it at a good pace with what's come before. And then we get into Like a Wall, which was the previous single that came out for the album. Just a classic pop prog rocker, much similar to a lot of Neal's singles that have come out from his albums, like City of Destruction, Momentum, Grand Experiment, all of those. Super catchy and fun with enough of Neal's trademark prog to keep it interesting and not just be a boring standard rock song, but it's really cool and fun, has a lot of character. Then we move into Gold Dust City, which is another really killer rock groove with some great female oohs and ahs in the back and featuring a strong rock vocal from Jake Livgren. Has a classic rock feel in the chorus and just feels like a classic song. It's just a really great feel. We get a great mid-song break with Neal's vocals that have a more dreamy quality to them, and we get the introduction of Talon David's vocals towards the end, leading into Slave Boy, which is her focus, her chance to shine, and has an infectious bass groove, some wah-wah guitars, gives a great spotlight to Talon's vocals, which are really fantastic and fun, and great background vocals also in the chorus. Just really cool stuff, great vocal melodies. And that leads us into Out of Sight, Out of Mind, which feels like a continuation of this track with some cinematic stabbing strings and more of those female vocals, once again leaning a bit more into the theatrical side of the release. But then we come to one of the album's highlights, one of my favorite songs on the record, Wait on You, which is like a classical Neal Morse ballad, epic sweeping track. There's almost some harp type mystical strings happening at the beginning and atmospheric washes with Neal's vocals starting a bit in the background and becoming more prominent as it continues. Great choruses, great sweeping build-ups, and it feels towards the end like on the grand scale of Similitude of a Dream, leading into a big emotive Eric Gillette guitar solo. Just one of the more transcendent moments on the whole record, and maybe could have been the great conclusion to end the whole piece on, but we still have a few more tracks here to keep going with. I Will Wait on the Lord is an interesting choral piece. Feels like you're in the middle of a big tabernacle in a church or something, listening to a massive choir, and it's really well done. I actually really enjoy this piece and appreciate something a little bit different on the record that adds a little bit of variety from a lot of these other pieces. Just beautifully constructed, great layered vocals, just a great choral piece of work. Leading into the Dreamer Overture Reprise, which is coming back to that overture proggy instrumental fireworks section, which is well needed to break up some of these other sections that didn't have quite the instrumental fireworks, but were more beautiful and soft. And that leads into Ultraviolet Dreams, which is a really tasty track with an understated blues type sound, a slow burning bluesy rocker, expertly crafted, great guitar solo towards the end, great vocal work from Neal, and another highlight from the record. I really enjoy this piece quite a bit. Leading into Heaven in Charge of Hell, which is another more, musical theater type track, but with some prog flourishes, reprising back some of those themes from the overture, some soaring guitars, but you get a flavor of that theatrical rock with all the different vocalists contributing to the piece. So it is a little bit on the musical theater end of the spectrum, but not too distracting to me because there's still great melodies and great instrumental work around it that makes it more palatable for someone like me that's not as into that. And then we get to the final track of the record, Why Have You Forsaken Me, which gives you some passionate keyboards and Neal's vocals, a strong melody, backing vocals and added strings, just a great build-up, a great epic piece to end this on, and a great little ending with some trumpet soloing, sweet piano, and a big gong crash to kind of give you this epic ending. This is a part 1, so it'll be interesting to see how this leads into part 2, which should hopefully be coming out early next year. So a really great, solid Neal Morse album. I don't think it quite raises to the heights of some of his big works like Sola Scriptura and One and Similitude of a Dream. It doesn't quite reach those heights, but it's not really meant to. I think it really stands in line with some of his more recent work, like I said, like Jesus Christ the Exorcist, like Sola Gratia. These works are more indicative of what you can expect here, but much to my delight and surprise, it's not leaning too heavily on the musical theater aspect that Jesus Christ the Exorcist did. It infuses a lot of cool prog elements like Sola Gratia, has a lot of cool bluesy rockers, just really great songs, really cool songwriting. I like how each track flows to the next and feels like this continuous narrative. It's an interesting story. Probably most are familiar with the story already, but it's a cool telling of it, and I think it's done pretty well. And so I just really enjoy it, and I'm going to be continuing to listen to it over and over again, especially once I get my hands on the physical copy, which has been taking its time getting to my house here, but should be here next week. So excited to spin it on vinyl and to gain an even bigger appreciation for all of the cool sounds on here. And Neal Morse is my favorite artist. He hardly ever disappoints me. And this is just another solid release from him that if you're a fan is a no-brainer to check out. And if you're not a fan or aren't familiar with his work, give it a shot as well. I think there's a lot to enjoy here for any prog fan, for any classic rock fan. It's just a really beautiful album that has a lot to enjoy, a lot of great performances, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about it. Thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you'd enjoy this episode, and I'll hopefully be back with you next week for another great album review. So thank you guys, and I'll catch you in a future episode. Bye everybody!